What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and we have another viewer-requested episode. This one is from the YouTube comments, so I do read those. I do my best to keep up on them, so thank you for everybody who's posting those. And if you have a request for an episode, let me know what card you'd like to see me yammer on about. Today we're going to be talking about Uvilda, Dean of Perfection, which is a card from Strixhaven that I have to read every single time I see it. Literally every single. I have read this card in its entirety like a dozen times at least. I have no doubt about it. And the truth of the matter is, the reason I have to do that is because every single time I finish reading the card, I parse, okay, what it does, and it's immediately followed by a realization that, oh yeah, that's not worth it. I'm not going to remember this. Like, I'm not going to play with this card. And then as a result, the next time it comes around, I need to reread it. And the truth of the matter is, that is true of a ton of the Deans. This is a cycle. There are 5 of these things from Strixhaven, all of which are neat characters who kind of embody their college on Strixhaven. If you're not familiar, Strixhaven is a plane that's modeled after a school, which is funny because everybody assumed it was going to be like magical Harry Potter, and it really wasn't. Like, it actually did a good job, I think, anyway, of kind of differentiating itself. You know, there's no like Hufflepuff allegory. You know, they just the colleges on Strixhaven are their own thing, and that's cool. And each college is made up of a conflicting color pair. So it's a 2-color set. It's a faction set. You have 5 different factions. They're each 2-color pairs, and they're all enemy colors. So it's kind of cool. And in Prismari, which is blue-red, or as we all like to know, as we like to call it, is it? Uvilda is one of the Deans, and is the blue-aligned Dean, and then we have the red-aligned Dean, Nasari. And the way that they did this on cards is they put both of those characters. So each college has 2 Deans, so there are 10 Deans in this school, and 2 per college, and they put each of them on a card, and it's a modal double face. You get them both. So it's kind of cool. So you could run a deck, like you could run a mono red deck with Nasari or a mono blue deck with Uvilda, and you don't have to, you could completely ignore the other side of the card. Pretend it doesn't even exist. Like, if you're doing this, like, technically Uvilda is the front face of the card. So if you are running a mono red deck with like Nasari and it gets blinked, it will come back as Uvilda, which is maybe a little awkward, but that kind of thing can happen, so be aware of that. But for the most part, like, this is a modal double face card. You pick what side you cast. So if I'm running a red deck with Nasari, I'm probably just gonna sleeve it with Nasari up front. You know, I'm not even gonna care. Just be aware of that rule interaction in case something happens where that might be relevant. But for the most part, if that's the mode you care about, that's the mode you care about. But anyway, what do these cards do? Let me read it again because I literally don't like my hippocampus refuses to retain the amount of text that is on these Deans. It happens with all of them, with one exception. There is one Dean that I actually think is a good card, and we're gonna get into that a little bit. Actually, there's 1.5 Deans that I think are good cards. We're gonna get into that, but for the most part, they're incredibly complicated and generally not quite worth the price of admission. So Uvilda, Dean of Perfection. 2/2 for 2 and a blue Djinn Wizard, legendary creature. Tap, you may exile an instant or sorcery card from your hand and put 3 hone counters on it. It gains at the beginning of your upkeep. If this card is exiled, remove a hone counter from it, and when the last hone counter is removed from this card, if it's exiled, you may cast it. It costs 4 generic less to cast this way. So what you're having to do, you have to pay 3 mana for a 2/2 creature. You then have to, it needs to survive a turn. You then tap, you go down a card in your hand and suspend it for 3 turns. And so usually when you suspend a card, once the last counter is removed from it, you just get it. But instead, in this case, these are called hone counters. They're not suspend counters. So as you remove when you remove the last hone counter, you get an opportunity. You are presented with the choice, do you cast this spell right now? If you do, you still have to pay all the colored mana required in that spell, and like if you say no, like in this turn, because the game state has completely changed over the last 3 turns, it is no longer advantageous for me to cast this spell. I'm going to choose no. Guess what? It's just in exile now. It's just gone. Well, it's great that I exiled this out of my hand 3 turns ago for no benefit. Like, I gotta be honest, this is rough. Like, this card is really bad. I mean, this is kind of a precursor to the way, like, actually, no, not even a precursor. This is like, this came out after, if I'm not mistaken. It's similar to the way that like Foretell works. The idea of like, you know, you're kind of putting a down payment on something and you get it at a reduced cost later, which is fine. But 3 turns is an eternity. Like, it just is. You know, in what world, I know they're in different colors, but in what world is Uvilda better than, say, a Cultivate? Because that is going to get you to your spells faster, and then you can just cast them out of your hand with control over how you time it. Like, yeah, I think this is kind of a quasi-suspend mode that just does not get there. Now, Prismari in Strixhaven, the blue-red faction, their whole thing was casting big spells. They wanted to make Prismari feel different from the Izzet League in Ravnica. So the Izzet League in Ravnica is all about, like, making spells cheaper, casting a lot of spells in a turn. That's where we get a lot of staples in Storm, you know, come from like that kind of aesthetic where the whole idea is like, I'm throwing 1 and 2 drops all over the place and I'm triggering stuff as I'm doing it. And maybe I'm copying them along the way. And like kind of that idea of like the hotshot spell slinging wizard is very much associated with kind of Izzet. And so like, okay, they wanted to do something with spells with Prismari, but how do we differentiate from that? And as a result, they decided to go for big bombastic spells. So as a result, you get your 8 drops, like Magma Opus came from this set, where, you know, it's the idea of like the grand finale in this performance that you're putting on, because Prismari are the theater kids. So, okay, in that idea, so Uvilda being able to tap and basically take 4 mana off of whatever spell you have in your hand, if you're sitting on an 8 drop or like a 7 drop, okay, like taking 4 mana off of that's not bad, but in a normal game of Magic, you're going to be doing that on turn 4 because you had to have dropped this 3 drop and then had it survive. So it just, I don't know. And on top of that, Magma Opus is really the only spell that's really worth it, in my opinion. Like, there are a lot of big 7 drop, like, good stuff that was in Strixhaven. Like, they clearly had the spells to try to back this up, but they just didn't quite fire, in my opinion. So that's Uvilda. Like, honestly, I just don't think this card is very good. Straight up, I would rather have a Grizzly Bears in my deck. So if you're into Uvilda, like, good luck making it work. And like, this is definitely jank territory. If you can pull this off, cool. But I mean, this is one of those things where you jump through all the hoops just to say you did it. Like, this is the speed run of like BioShock, where you use only the wrench. Like, if you're playing this card, like, you're choosing to handicap yourself, which, to be fair, if that's the gameplay you're looking for, go for it. Like, give it a shot. But there are so many better options. Now, what's on the backside? Is Nasari any good? Nasari, Dean of Expression, is a 4/4 for 3 red. 4/4 for 5. Understated, but okay. For a Nefrit Shaman. I don't know why I, like, put a little flair on that, I think, anyway. I don't know. I'm just... At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of each opponent's library. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those exiled cards, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, put a +1/+1 counter on Nasari, Dean of Expression. Honestly, Nasari is way better, especially in Commander. So if you are running this card in your deck, do it for Nasari. However, I do want to point out a very important detail, because Nasari is piggybacking off of Uvilda here. If you have a red deck, like let's say you have a Prosper Tomebound deck that is casting cards from exile and you're really, really jazzed and you want Nasari in there, too bad, you can't do it, because Prosper's color identity is red-black. And Nasari's the card's color identity is red-blue. So because that blue is there, Nasari, even though you can cast Nasari in mono red, no blue mana necessary, you can get all the benefits, and frankly, it would fit like in a Prosper style deck. You can't do it you would have to have some other Grixis commander with like a secret prosper situation where you could like tutor them out or something. You'd have to jump through some hoops to get blue as part of your commander's color identity. So that's another like strike against the Deans in Commander specifically. The reason I mentioned Commander for Nasari is because in 60 card formats, a 4/4 for 5 is probably not going to survive until the upkeep rolls around. And even if it does, you're only drawing 1 card because you only have 1 opponent. Meanwhile, in Commander, you're going to draw 3 cards or more, depending on the size of your pod. So that actually could be really valuable. The card advantage you get off this is actually really good. So this is like a super Howling Mine, and if you actually cast 1 or hopefully 2 of the spells you just exiled, then all of a sudden Nasari is going to get beefed up with those counters. That's not bad. You can work with that. So that ain't bad. So I mentioned the other Deans. For the most part, if you are looking at a card from Strixhaven with Dean in the name, it is probably going to be like, it's probably going to be hyper complicated and not particularly good. Be aware of that. That is kind of the nature of the beast, with one exception. So I said 1.5 exceptions. The one full-on exception is Valentin, Dean of the Vein. This card is strictly great. And the backside, like, so of all the 10 Deans, the best one mechanically, in my opinion, is Valentin, Dean of the Vein. And the second one is on Valentin's backside, which is Lizette, Dean of the Root. And both of these cards would fit really nicely in a good Golgari deck together. So, like, honestly, this card is really freaking good. Now, what makes Valentin so good? It's a 1/1 for 1 with Menace and Lifelink Vampire Warlock. So we get 2 creature types that are valuable, a good stat line, and meaningful keywords. But wait, there's more. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. Honestly, the pest trigger, being able to pay 2 and create a pest, like, you might have mana lying around at some point, but honestly, like, I've played this card a lot. I almost never use that. But my opponent's creatures dying into exile instead of the graveyard is shockingly relevant because that shuts down death triggers or any chances of recurring loops. So you get a 1/1 Menace life-linking vampire for 1 that is incidentally a Leyline of the Void. Like, kind of. Like, this thing's great. So this card is just super rad. And then Lizette on the backside, 4/4 for 2 green. So here we get a 4/4 for 4 instead of 5, which I'll take it. And whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample until end of turn. So it's an overrun tied to life gain. And they're counters, so they stick around. So you do need extra mana to pump into this to get the advantage, which is not ideal. However, like, gaining life is not that tough to do these days, especially if you're using effects like Prosperous Innkeeper or, you know, Essence Warden or whatever, where you, like, whenever a creature enters, you just gain a life. So the idea of, like, a creature enters, you gain a life, you pay 1, everybody's +1/+1 and trample until end of turn. No, well, it's a counter. The +1/+1 sticks around. Like, I don't know. This card has actually won quite a few games for me. It's actually shockingly good in a deck that is going wide. So if you're going wide with any kind of life gain synergies, Lizette kind of rules. I know that's relatively narrow, but man, if you want it, if you can use it, this is fantastic. So this card is great. Yeah, Lizette and Valentin, very, very good. I do highly recommend you use both of these. They're rad. Now, I mentioned a half of a Dean that I like. And I don't even know that this is necessarily good, but I like it. And that's Shale, Dean of Radiance. I have a soft spot for birds. Like, it was one of my old, like, kitchen table janky decks was a Soulcatcher's Airy deck. So I love birds. Like, any kind of bird synergy I'm on board for. So here we have a bird cleric. Again, 2 good creature types. 1/1 flying vigilance for 1 and a white. Tap. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So if you have a situation where you're creating a bunch of tokens, you can attack with this and then tap and boom, all those tokens get +1/+1 counters. That ain't bad. And a 1/1 flying vigilance for 2. There was a time when that was pretty good, actually. Nowadays, it's negligible as far as stats go. if you have a way to give Shale haste, you could actually give it. It could give itself a +1/+1 counter. That's kind of neat. But anyway, I have a soft spot for this card. I think it's pretty good. Also, of all the Strixhaven colleges, I definitely identified with Silverquill because I'm an English major, and so it's like, oh, the prose writer kids also are like the preppy like power fantasy kid I wanted to be. Yeah, I'm gonna root for them. So yeah, Shale being Silverquill, pretty cool. I like that. Now, but who's on Shale's backside? I mentioned that they weren't good, and unfortunately, it's Killian's dad, Embrose, Dean of Shadow. Cool character. I like the character a lot, and again, I like what he's doing. And mechanically, this is an interesting design, but I just don't think it's good enough. So it's a two black for a 4/4, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature, then Embrose deals 2 damage to that creature. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, draw a card. So this kind of makes sense from a mechanical perspective as like, because if I'm not mistaken, in the story, Embrose is like the dad who's like pushing his kid way too hard and like just will not get off his kid's back in an attempt to try to achieve perfection. And like, I can understand that as a character motivation, and the depiction here of like, I'm going to boost you up, but then I'm going to hurt you. But if you survive, you're going to be stronger for it. So you're welcome. Like, that's kind of an unhealthy dynamic between a student and a teacher in any capacity, much less like a child and their father, right? So, but mechanically, that kind of fits here, you know? But the weird thing is, like, okay, I'm gonna boost you up and then I'm gonna hurt you, but if I kill you, I profit. Like, whoa. I don't know how much I like that last part about being able to draw a card if the thing dies. Like, it goes a little far for me there. But in general, all in all, I think this is an interesting design, but not a very good card. At the end of the day, you have to jump through too many hoops. You have to tap, like, so the thing about, it's this weird duality. Embrose is a 4/4 for 4. So by the time Embrose is online, it's a creature that needs to be relevant in combat, right? But in order to use Embrose, you have to tap him. So you can't attack with you, potentially, like, one of your good creatures, maybe not your best, but like a good sized creature, in order to get that benefit, and you have to have another creature online in order to use that ability. If your opponent has like a bounce spell or removal to deal with the creature that you're targeting with this, no matter what happens, you just got blown out and your 4/4's offline now. Now you can do that at instant speed, to be fair, so you can hold him back to block, and then like in blocks or, you know, at end step, you can use the ability to buff one of your other teammates. So like, that's fine, but I don't know. In general, I've never found a use for this guy, and I think he requires too many hoops to jump through, and you don't get enough benefit, bang for the buck. Whereas Shale's fine. Like, it's fine for what it does. I've definitely run, like, I've done mono white or Azorius, like bird shells in the past, where Shale has been included, and it's not bad. Like, it fits the role pretty nicely. If you're in a situation where you're dropping 3-4 creatures a turn with token generation and whatnot, yeah, being able to buff the whole squad on a tap, that's meaningful. That does add a lot of power to the board. So that's something. Valentine's still number 1 though. Love this guy. But anyway, so Uvilda is where we started. Dean of Perfection. I feel like Uvilda themselves actually really exemplifies the problem with the Strixhaven Deans. And, you know, they're just overly complicated. Juice is not worth the squeeze here. And it's unfortunate because it is interesting design space that they tampered with, like they experimented with all these cards. I just wish they played better, is really the bottom line. So, thank you so much for checking out the show. This has been an edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast, available anywhere podcasts are available, as well as on YouTube, actually, if you want to see my gums flap, with my kind of sketchy lighting in the evening when I'm recording this. But anyway, thank you so much. I'll catch you on the next one.